The rain hammered against the apartment window like bullets against glass. Park Ho-min stood in the darkened hallway, his gloved hand trembling around the grip of his pistol. 23 years old, and this was only his fourth assignment. His heartbeat thundered in his ears, drowning out everything except the words his boss had hissed into his phone 2 hours earlier: kill them all. No witnesses. Not even the baby. He pushed open the bedroom door. The silencer did its job twice. The men collapsed first, then the woman who'd been sleeping beside him. Ho-min's stomach lurted, bile rising in his throat, but he swallowed it down. This was the life he'd chosen. This was survival in Seoul's underground. He'd been told the man was going to testify, that his testimony would bring down half the organization. Ho-min didn't know if that was true, and he'd learned quickly not to ask questions. But then he heard it. A soft coo from the corner of the room. His blood turned to ice. The crib sat beneath a window streaked with rain. Ho-min approached slowly, his weapon still raised, his mind screaming at him to finish the job and leave. He looked down and his entire world fractured. An 8-month-old baby girl stared up at him with wide dark eyes. Her skin was deep brown, her hair in tiny coils, and she was smiling. Actually smiling. At him. At the monster who'd just murdered her parents. Tears streaked her chubby cheeks, but she reached up with tiny fingers as if asking to be held. As if she trusted him. Ho-min's hands began to shake violently. The gun felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He'd killed before. 3 times. All men who'd known what they were getting into. But this was different. This was an innocent life that hadn't even begun. I can't, he whispered into the darkness. I can't do this. He holstered his weapon and reached into the crib, lifting the baby with awkward, inexperienced hands. She was so light, so fragile. She grabbed onto his jacket and made a happy sound that shattered something deep in his chest. Ho-min looked back at the bodies on the bed, then down at the child in his arms. In that moment, he made a choice that would define the rest of his life. He wrapped the baby in a blanket, tucked her against his chest beneath his coat, and walked out into the rain. His phone buzzed. His boss. He answered with a steady voice that betrayed none of the terror coursing through him. It's done. All of them. The lie came easily, almost too easily. I'm disposing of the bodies now. Good. Clean work, Ho-min. You're learning. He ended the call and looked down at the baby who'd fallen asleep against his heartbeat. What have I done? He breathed into the night. But even as guilt threatened to consume him, he held her tighter. I'll keep you safe. I promise. The next 5 years passed in a blur of paranoia and unexpected joy. Ho-min disappeared from the organization's radar, telling his superiors he needed to lie low after a close call with police. They accepted it. Hitmen came and went. Bodies were replaced. But he knew the truth: if they ever discovered what he'd done, both he and the child would die. He named her Zuri after looking up African names in a library. Beautiful. That's what it meant. And she was. Every smile, every laugh, every stumbling step she took felt like redemption he didn't deserve. He found work as a construction laborer, then as a night security guard, anything that kept him away from his old life. They lived in a tiny apartment on the outskirts of Seoul, far from the glittering downtown where he'd once collected blood money. Raising a child alone was harder than any job he'd ever pulled. Those first months were hell. Diapers, formula, sleepless nights where Zuri would scream for hours and he'd pace the apartment holding her, terrified the neighbors would call the police. He had no idea what he was doing. No manual for how a hitman becomes a father. But slowly, clumsily, he figured it out. By the time she was 3, Zuri was calling him Appa, and his heart broke a little more each time. He'd crafted a story for her, a lie that felt kinder than the truth. Your parents died in an accident when you were a baby. I was your father's friend. I promised to take care of you. She accepted it without question, the way children accept the world they're given. Every night after she fell asleep, Ho-min would sit alone in the darkness and stare at a photograph he'd stolen from that apartment 20 years ago. The men he'd killed smiled out at him, his arm around his wife, both of them so happy. So alive. The weight of what he'd done never lessened. If anything, it grew heavier as Zuri grew older. Some nights he'd stand over her bed and whisper apologies she couldn't hear. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll spend my whole life making it up to you." But guilt couldn't stop him from loving her. She was brilliant and curious, always asking questions about everything. Why is the sky blue? Where do stars come from? Why do people hurt each other? That last question always made him flinch. He'd deflect, distract, anything to avoid thinking about the answer he could never give. School was a challenge. Korea wasn't always kind to children who looked different. Zuri came home crying more than once, asking why her skin wasn't like the other kids, why her hair was different. Homin held her and felt rage burn through him, rage at a world that would hurt this innocent soul, rage at himself for putting her in this position. But he taught her to be proud, to stand tall, to never let anyone make her feel less than whole. "You're special, Zuri. You're beautiful and strong and the world needs people like you." She believed him. That was the miracle. Despite everything, she grew up happy. She made friends. She excelled in school. She loved drawing and writing stories and asking him to read them before bed. Those were the moments when Homin forgot about the blood on his hands. Those were the moments when he felt almost human again. The teenage years brought new fears. Zuri started asking more questions about her parents, wanting to know details Homin didn't have. He'd fabricated a story about a car accident, about how he didn't know much about her father's past because they'd only been friends briefly. The lies tasted like ash in his mouth, but what choice did he have? The truth would destroy her. The truth would destroy everything they'd built. She became passionate about justice, about truth, about holding powerful people accountable. Of all the things she could have been interested in, of course it was this. She'd come home from high school talking about corruption scandals in the news, about journalists who exposed wrongdoing, about how she wanted to make a difference. Homin would smile and encourage her while his stomach twisted into knots. "Don't look too deep," he'd think. "Don't dig into the darkness. You don't know what monsters live there." When Zuri got accepted to university for journalism, Homin cried. Pride and terror mixed together until he couldn't tell them apart. She was 22 now, brilliant and driven and so full of righteous anger at injustice. She'd look at him with those same eyes that had stared up from a crib 2 decades ago and tell him about her dreams of exposing organized crime, of bringing down the powerful men who thought they were above the law. "I want to give voices to people who can't speak for themselves, Appa," she'd said over dinner one night, her eyes shining with determination. "People whose stories never get told because they're inconvenient or dangerous." "That's noble," he'd replied quietly, pushing rice around his bowl. "But it's also dangerous, Zuri. These people you want to expose, they don't play by rules." "I'm not afraid of danger," she'd said with the confidence of someone who'd never truly faced it. "Someone has to stand up to them." He wanted to grab her shoulders and tell her everything. Tell her that the world was darker than she imagined, that the monsters were real and they lived in the shadows and they would absolutely destroy her without hesitation. Tell her that he knew because he'd been one of them. But he couldn't. So he just nodded and said, "Be careful. Please." The nightmares never stopped. Homin would wake up gasping, the sound of those silenced gunshots still echoing in his ears, the image of that bedroom burned into his brain. He'd stumble to Zuri's room and watch her sleep, reassuring himself that she was real, that she was safe, that he'd kept his promise. Some nights she'd wake up and find him there. "Bad dreams again, Appa?" she'd ask sleepily. "Yeah. Go back to sleep. You should see someone about that. A therapist or something." He'd smile in the darkness. "Maybe. Good night, Zuri." If she only knew that she was both the cause of his nightmares and the only thing that made them bearable. For 20 years, Homin managed to keep his past buried. He'd changed his name legally, moved multiple times, maintained no contact with anyone from his old life. He existed in the margins, working jobs that paid cash, keeping his head down, living only for the daughter who'd saved him from himself. He thought maybe, just maybe, he could die peacefully one day knowing he'd done at least one good thing with his cursed life. But the past doesn't stay buried forever. Zuri burst through the apartment door on a cold November evening, her laptop bag swinging wildly, her face flushed with excitement and something else. Something that made Homin's blood run cold the moment he saw her expression. "Appa, I need to ask you something," she said, her voice shaking. She set her laptop on the kitchen table and opened it with trembling fingers. I've been working on a project for my investigative journalism class. We're looking into cold cases, unsolved crimes from the early 2000s. Ho Min's mouth went dry. Oh. I found something. This case, it was from 2003. A man and his wife were murdered in their apartment in Itaewon. Execution style. The police suspected gang involvement but could never prove anything. She turned the laptop toward him and he saw a scanned police report, photos he recognized from that night. His vision blurred. The weird thing is, Appa, they had a baby. 8 months old. The police reports say the baby was presumed dead but the body was never found. It was just listed as missing, presumed deceased. Zuri, why are you looking into this? His voice came out hoarse. She reached into her shirt and pulled out a necklace, a small silver pendant with an inscription. Because the man in these photos is wearing this exact necklace in every picture. And you gave me this necklace when I was little. You told me it belonged to my father. The world stopped. Ho Min couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at that necklace swinging between them like a pendulum counting down to the end of everything. Where did you get that? He whispered. You gave it to me. When I was 7, you said it was from my father, that you'd kept it safe for me. Her voice was rising, panic bleeding through. Appa, I looked up the victims. The man was Kenyan, his wife was Korean. Their baby was mixed, black and Korean, just like me. And she was 8 months old when they died. The same age you told me I was when you took me in. Zuri, please. He stood up from his chair, his legs weak. You don't understand. Then make me understand. She slammed her hands on the table. Who am I? Who were they? What happened that night? Sit down. His voice was barely audible. No. I deserve to know the truth. Sit down. The command came out with such force that she flinched and sank into a chair. Ho Min had never yelled at her before. Not once in 22 years. He walked to the window and stared out at Seoul's lights, the same city that had swallowed so many secrets. His hands were shaking again, just like they had that night in the rain. You want the truth? He didn't turn around. He couldn't look at her. The truth is going to destroy everything between us. Are you sure you want it? Yes. Her voice was small now, frightened. Please, Appa. So he told her. Everything. The words came out mechanical at first, a confession he'd rehearsed 1,000 times in his head but never thought he'd actually speak. He told her about the organization, about the orders he'd received, about walking into that apartment with murder in his heart. He told her about pulling the trigger twice, about the blood, about the silence that followed. I was supposed to kill you too, he said, his voice breaking. You were in a crib in the corner. Just a baby. You looked up at me and you smiled. You actually smiled at me. And I couldn't do it. He heard her make a sound behind him, something between a sob and a gasp. He forced himself to continue. I took you. I lied to the organization and said everyone was dead. I disappeared with you and I've been running from that night ever since. He finally turned to face her. Tears streamed down her face, her hands pressed over her mouth. I killed your parents, Zuri. I murdered them in cold blood. And then I raised you as my own because I couldn't live with what I'd done. Because you were the only innocent thing I'd ever touched and I couldn't let you die too. The silence that followed was deafening. Zuri stared at him like she'd never seen him before. Like he was a stranger. He wanted to reach for her but his arms felt too heavy, too stained with old blood to ever touch her again. You killed them. Her voice was hollow. You killed my mother and father. Yes. And then you raised me. You've been lying to me my entire life. Yes. Why? The word came out as a scream. Why would you do that? Why would you save me? Why not just finish the job? Because I couldn't. His own tears finally broke free. Because I looked at you and I saw innocence and I saw a chance, maybe just one chance in my worthless life, to do something right instead of wrong. I thought if I could keep you safe, if I could give you a good life, maybe I could balance the scales somehow. Balance the scales. She stood up, knocking her chair over. You can't balance murder. You can't make up for taking someone's life by raising their child. That's not redemption, she struggled for words. That's torture. For both of us. I know. He sank to his knees, completely broken. I know there's no redemption for what I did. I've known that every single day. Every time you called me Appa, every time you hugged me, every time you looked at me with love, it was a knife in my heart because I knew I didn't deserve any of it. I wanted to tell you 1,000 times. I wanted to die 1,000 times. But I couldn't leave you alone and I couldn't break your heart with the truth. Zuri wrapped her arms around herself, shaking violently. I don't know who you are. I don't know who I am. Everything is a lie. No, he looked up at her through his tears. The love isn't a lie. That was the only real thing in my entire miserable existence. I love you more than my own life, Zuri. That's not fake. That's not manipulation. You saved me from being completely lost. You gave me a reason to be something other than a monster. But you are a monster, she sobbed. You killed my parents. You took everything from me. And I gave you everything I had. His voice was quiet now, resigned. I know it doesn't make it right. Nothing makes it right. But I need you to know that every moment I spent raising you, I was trying to honor your parents' memory. I was trying to give you the life they would have wanted for you. Don't you dare. Her voice turned sharp, cold. Don't you dare tell me what my parents would have wanted. You made sure I'd never know what they wanted. She was right. Of course she was right. Ho-min had no response to that. He remained on his knees while Zuri paced the small apartment like a caged animal, her mind clearly racing, trying to process the impossible truth that had just shattered her reality. I need to leave, she finally said. I can't be here right now. I can't look at you. Where will you go? Panic seized him. Zuri, please, it's not safe to. Not safe. She laughed bitterly. I've been living with my parents' killer for 22 years. I think I know about not being safe. She grabbed her bag and headed for the door. Ho-min struggled to his feet. Wait. Please. Let me explain about the organization, about why you need to be careful. I don't care. She spun on him. I don't care about your excuses or your explanations or your guilt. I need to figure out who I am without you in my head. The door slammed behind her and Ho-min was alone. Completely, utterly alone for the first time in 22 years. He collapsed back to his knees and wept, great heaving sobs that shook his entire body. He'd known this day would come eventually. He'd known the truth would surface. He'd just hoped somehow, impossibly, that it wouldn't hurt this much. But it hurt more than he'd ever imagined. Because losing her was worse than dying. It was worse than anything the Mafia could have done to him. It was the price of his sins finally coming due. The next 3 weeks were hell. Zuri wouldn't answer his calls. His texts went unread. He drove by her apartment but she'd moved out, crashing with friends according to a neighbor. Ho-min existed in a fog of grief and terror. Not knowing where she was, not knowing if she was safe, it consumed him. He could barely eat, couldn't sleep. He'd stand at the window for hours, watching the street below, waiting for her to come home even though he knew she wouldn't. He thought about turning himself into the police. At least then she'd know he'd face justice. But that would expose her connection to him, put her under investigation, potentially destroy her career before it began. So he stayed in limbo, trapped between the past and a future that no longer existed. On the 24th day, his old phone rang. The one he'd kept hidden in a lockbox, the number known only to people from his previous life. His blood ran cold. He'd turned it on once a month just to check if anyone from the organization was looking for him. It had never rung. Not once in 20 years. Until now. He answered with a steady voice that betrayed none of his fear. Yes. Park Ho-min. The voice on the other end was older but still carried authority. It's been a long time. Who is this? You know who I am. The question is, did you think we'd never find out? His heart stopped. Find out what? About the baby. A pause. About the girl you've been raising. Did you really think you could hide her forever? Did you think we wouldn't eventually discover that you left a witness alive? She was 8 months old. She saw nothing. She knows nothing. The lies came automatically, but they felt hollow. That was true. Until 3 weeks ago, when she started digging into her parents' murder. Until she started asking questions about cold cases involving organized crime. We have people everywhere, home and including the university. We know what she's been researching. Terror unlike anything he'd ever felt seized him. Leave her alone. She doesn't know anything. I never told her who did it. Please. You made a fool of us. You made me personally look incompetent 20 years ago. Do you know what that cost me? The voice turned hard. I should have killed you both then. I'm correcting that mistake now. I'll turn myself in. I'll take whatever punishment you want. Just leave Zuri out of this. He was begging now and didn't care. She's innocent. There are no innocents in our world. You taught her that the moment you pulled her from that crib. The line went dead. Ho-min dropped the phone and ran. He had to find Zuri. He had to warn her. He called her number again and again while driving through Seoul like a madman. Finally, on the 7th call, she answered. What? Her voice was cold. Zuri, listen to me. You're in danger. They know about you. You need to leave Seoul right now. Get on a train, a bus, anything. Go somewhere public with cameras. Who knows about me? What are you talking about? The organization. The people who ordered your parents killed. They found out you've been researching the case. They're coming for both of us. She laughed bitterly. Is this another lie? Another manipulation to get me to talk to you? I wish it was. His voice cracked. Zuri, I know you hate me. You should hate me. But I've kept you safe for 22 years and I'm not going to fail you now. Please, trust me one more time. Run. Something in his voice must have convinced her because he heard movement on the other end, heard her breathing quicken. Where do I go? Anywhere but your apartment. Stay in public. I'm going to handle this. Handle it how? What are you going to do? What I should have done 20 years ago. He pulled up to his apartment building. I'm going to end this. No. Appa, wait. But he'd already hung up. There was no point in dragging it out. He knew what was coming. The only question was whether he could protect her one final time before it ended. He went up to his apartment and packed a bag quickly. Money he'd been saving for Zuri's future. Documents with her real identity, her parents' names, everything he'd kept hidden all these years. He put it all in an envelope and wrote her name on it. Then he took out his old gun, the one he'd sworn he'd never touch again, and checked that it was loaded. They came at sunset. 3 of them, professional and efficient, just like he used to be. They didn't knock. The door exploded inward and Ho-min was ready. He shot the first one before he cleared the doorframe. The second one got a round off that caught Ho-min in the shoulder, but he ignored the pain and put 2 in the man's chest. The third one dove for cover and they exchanged shots across the small apartment. You always were good, the third one called out. Could have been great if you hadn't gone soft. I didn't go soft, Ho-min replied, blood soaking through his shirt. I woke up. To what? Morality. The men laughed. You're a killer, Ho-min. That's all you'll ever be. You're wrong. He thought of Zuri's smile, her laughter, every moment of joy she'd brought into his dark world. I was a father. That's what I'll die as. The final exchange of gunfire lasted seconds. Ho-min felt the bullets hit him, felt his body failing, but he'd gotten the job done. All 3 attackers lay still. He pulled himself across the floor, leaving a trail of blood, and grabbed his phone. His vision was blurring, but he managed to dial her number one last time. Appa. Zuri's voice was panicked. Where are you? What's happening? It's done, he whispered. They came and it's done. You're safe now. No, no, no. Tell me where you are. I'll call an ambulance. Envelope, kitchen table, everything about your parents, their names, their story. His breath was coming in gasps now. I'm sorry, so sorry I couldn't give it to you, myself. Don't do this. She was crying now. Don't leave me. You're all I have. You have your parents' memory, you have the truth now, you have yourself. He coughed and tasted copper. That's more than I ever deserved to give you. I forgive you, she screamed into the phone. Do you hear me? I forgive you. So don't you dare die. Don't you dare leave me alone. Ho-min smiled, blood on his lips. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. Thank you for letting me be your Appa, even if I didn't deserve it. Please, she sobbed. Please don't go. I kept my promise, he whispered, his eyes closing. I didn't let them touch you. The phone slipped from his fingers. The last thing he heard was Zuri screaming his name. The last thing he thought was that maybe, just maybe, keeping her alive counted for something in the cosmic balance sheet of his cursed life. Maybe love born from blood could still be real. Maybe redemption wasn't about deserving it. Maybe it was just about trying anyway. Then there was nothing but darkness and the ghost of a baby smile from 22 years ago. The funeral was small. Just Zuri standing in the rain, holding an umbrella over a grave that bore a name that wasn't even real. Park Ho-min had died 20 years ago in every way that mattered. The man in the ground had been someone else. Someone who'd made terrible choices and then spent his whole life trying to balance them with love. Zuri had found the envelope, read every document, learned her real parents' names. David Wonjiru and Kim Min-seo. They'd been activists, according to the newspaper articles she'd discovered. They'd been planning to testify about corruption in a development project that had displaced hundreds of families. They'd been silenced for doing the right thing. And she was their daughter. Zuri Wonjiru. That was her real name. She'd been born into a family that believed in justice, that fought for the powerless, that refused to stay silent. She carried their legacy in her blood. But she also carried Ho-min's love in her heart. That was the impossible truth she'd have to live with. Her parents had been murdered by the men who raised her. The men who killed her beginning had given her a life he didn't think he deserved. How did you reconcile that? How did you hold both truths at once? She knelt by the grave and placed a hand on the wet earth. I don't know if I can forgive you completely, she whispered. I don't know if what you did was redemption or just a longer kind of torture for both of us. But I know you loved me. I know every sacrifice you made was real. I know you kept me safe when you could have just finished what you started. The rain fell harder. She pulled her coat tighter and stood up. Around her neck, she wore the necklace. Her father's necklace. But also the necklace Ho-min had kept safe for 22 years, waiting for the right moment to give it back. In a way, it represented both men. The one who'd given her life and the one who'd saved it. I'm going to finish what they started, she said to the grave. My real parents, I mean. I'm going to expose corruption. I'm going to fight for justice. I'm going to make sure their deaths meant something. She paused. And I'm going to do it remembering everything you taught me too. About sacrifice. About protection. About how love can exist even in the darkest places. She turned to walk away, then stopped and looked back one final time. I don't know if you found peace. I don't know if people like you get to. But I hope wherever you are, you know that you weren't just a monster. You were my Appa. And I'll carry that with me forever, even if it hurts. Zuri walked through the rain toward her car, her heart heavy with grief and anger and love and confusion, all tangled together in a knot she might never fully untie. Behind her, the grave stood silent, holding the body of a man who'd spent 22 years trying to atone for one night of unforgivable sin. A man who'd learned too late that you can't undo the past, but maybe you can build something beautiful from its ruins anyway. The rain continued to fall, washing away her footprints, leaving only questions that would haunt her forever. Can love born from tragedy still be real? Can a monster become a father? Can you forgive the unforgivable? She didn't have the answers. Maybe there weren't any. Maybe some truths were meant to exist in the gray spaces between right and wrong, in the complicated reality where people are both terrible and wonderful, where the worst crime can lead to the greatest love. All she knew was that she was Zuri Wonjiru, daughter of David and Min-seo, raised by Park Ho-min. She carried all of them inside her. And she would spend the rest of her life figuring out what that meant. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the complicated nature of redemption and love, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below sharing your thoughts. Could you forgive someone who took everything from you but also gave you everything they had? Let's talk about it. And don't forget to like this video to help others find this story. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.